200,000 miles from Earth. April 1970. 3 men are coasting toward the moon in a spacecraft called Odyssey, and the flight has been so smooth, so completely routine, that the television networks back home did not even carry their evening broadcast. Mission control radios up a small housekeeping request. Stir the oxygen tanks. It is a switch the crew has flipped dozens of times. The pilot reaches out and flips it. 95 seconds later, a muffled bang shudders through the ship. The lights flicker, and half the spacecraft begins bleeding its oxygen into the dark. In the next 4 days, these 3 men will fly farther from Earth than anyone before or since, in a cabin near freezing, rationing water by the mouthful, while the whole planet finally stops to watch. This is Thin Margins, Episode 4. The switch that turned a boring flight into the most watched rescue in history, and the 250,000-mile ride home in a lifeboat built for 2. Rewind 3 days. Apollo 13 was the 3rd mission meant to land on the moon, and by April of 1970, America had decided that moon landings were normal. The commander was Jim Lovell, the most traveled human in space, on his 4th flight. Beside him, Fred Hayes, and a last-minute substitute. 3 days before launch, the crew was exposed to German measles, and the prime pilot of the command module, Ken Mattingly, had no immunity. 72 hours before liftoff, his backup, Jack Swigert, was strapped into his seat instead. The public shrugged. The networks passed on the broadcasts. Even inside the crew, there was a joke about the mission number and the launch minute, 1313 local time. Nobody believed in the curse. They believed in the machine. The machine, as it turned out, had been quietly broken for weeks before it ever left the ground. Deep inside the service module sat Oxygen Tank 2, a steel sphere of liquid oxygen that fed the ship's power and the crew's lungs. Years earlier, the spacecraft's electrical system had been upgraded to a higher voltage, but the little thermostat switches inside the tank were never upgraded to match. During a test on the launch pad, that mismatch quietly welded the switches shut, and heaters meant to warm the tank gently cooked it for 8 hours instead, baking the insulation off the wiring inside. The gauges could not show temperatures that high. Nobody knew. So when the pilot flipped the fan switch, a spark jumped between bare wires inside a tank of pure oxygen. Fire in a steel bottle. The pressure spiked, the tank let go, and the blast tore the side panel off the ship. The pilot keyed his microphone. "Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here." In Houston, screens filled with nonsense. Pressures falling, voltages sagging, signals flickering like a machine telling lies. Then Lovell looked out the window and saw the truth with his own eyes. The ship was venting a thin silver cloud into space. Their oxygen. Both tanks were emptying, and as the oxygen died, the fuel cells that made the ship's electricity were dying with it. The command module had battery power for re-entry, and almost nothing else. So Flight Control made a call with no page in any checklist. Shut Odyssey down. All of it. Every computer, every gyro, every warm thing, saved like a candle stub for the last hour of the flight. Move the crew into the lunar lander Aquarius and use it as a lifeboat. The lander was built to keep 2 men alive for about 2 days on the moon. It now had to keep 3 men alive for 4 days, across 250,000 miles of nothing. The margin was the machine next door. There was no turning around. The fastest way home was the longest way, all the way out, around the far side of the moon, and let gravity throw them back. On the way, they set a record no crew has touched since, the farthest human beings have ever been from Earth. 2 hours past the moon, They lit the lander's descent engine, a burn it was never designed for, to cut half a day off the trip and aim the ship at the Pacific Ocean. Then they powered down almost everything, and the cold moved in. Cabin temperature fell toward freezing. Water was rationed to 6 ounces per man, per day, a fifth of normal. Condensation crawled over every window and every panel. When a course correction was needed, the guidance computer was asleep, so Lovell flew the burn by hand, keeping the line between night and day on Earth centered in his window. 100-year-old sailor's trick, 250,000 miles up. Then the air itself turned against them. 3 men breathing in a cabin built for 2 were filling it with carbon dioxide, and the lander's round scrubber canisters were running out. Odyssey next door had plenty, but its canisters were square. A square cartridge for a round socket, with 3 lives on the clock. In Houston, engineers dumped onto a table only the things they knew were aboard the ship: plastic bags, cardboard covers torn from checklists, a hose from a pressure suit, and a roll of gray tape. In an hour, they had built a box that married square to round. They called it the mailbox. The instructions were read up to the crew step by step, like a recipe over the phone, and Swigert and Hayes built their own copy in orbit. They taped it into the wall, and the poison in the air began to fall almost immediately. Duct tape and checklist covers. That was the margin. So what actually held? Look at the scoreboard. A thermostat failed, a tiny switch never upgraded for a new voltage, welded shut during a test nobody flagged. The warnings failed, a tank that would not drain, a gauge that could not read high enough to show the damage being done. And against all that, the margins held. A lunar lander built for 2 men, and 2 days stretched to 3 men, and 4 days. Because its designers had built-in slack they never expected to spend. A crew that flew a dead reckoning burn by hand, with the Earth's own daylight as their instrument. And 2 rooms full of people, one in the sky and one on the ground, passing solutions back and forth like a bucket brigade, checklist covers, plastic bags, gray tape, an engine fired in ways its builders never promised. Nothing about the rescue was in a manual. Everything about it was in the margins. Scoreboard. The idea one last time. On the last day, the crew cast off the wounded service module and finally saw the damage. An entire panel was gone, blown out from the inside, one whole side of the spacecraft missing. And below that torn skin sat the heat shield they were about to bet their lives on. Nobody could inspect it. Re-entry cuts off all radio for about 4 minutes. Apollo 13 came in shallow, and the silence stretched to 6. In mission control, nobody moved. Then, a camera on the recovery ship found 3 parachutes over the Pacific, and the room came apart. The crew had lost 31 pounds between them. The tanks were redesigned, the thermostats replaced, and Lovell named the whole affair a successful failure. Thin Margins is a catalog of holds, and this one belongs to the people who refuse to stop solving. Next time, another moment on the edge. This was Thin Margins on the Quantum Files. If you want the next close call when it lands, subscribe to the Quantum Files. The margins are thin. That is why the people matter.